Okay, cool. We are live. Everything is set up.
Right.
Um, so, Cara, hello and welcome. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
We are so pumped to have you on. Guys, if you do not already know Dr. Cara Goodwin or the Parenting Translator on Instagram, please head over. After this, after you watch this interview, we're going to have an awesome discussion about all the research and the science behind parenting, because there is a lot out there, right, about all the different strategies or approaches or ways we can raise, successful, kind, resilient, emotionally intelligent kids. And so I'm so excited to have you on and kind of not fire questions at you. I'm not going to do that, but but get your knowledge and your wisdom. I think voices like yours are so needed in the space at the moment, because at least I see a lot of parents are really now much more conscious and intentional about how they're raising their kids, more so than ever before. I don't know if you agree with that, or if that's just my
Yes, I think so too. Yes.
So guys, I'm going to read out a little bit about Cara if you don't already know or follow her work. Like I said, over on Instagram, she has a beautiful account that she's so regularly posting that the information and the knowledge and the research that I find super beneficial, for me and my two kids, but also for my work with parents and stuff. So I want to give you guys a bit of a background. So Dr. Cara Goodwin, PhD, is a licensed clinical psychologist and a mother to three. She specializes in child development and has spent years researching child psychology and neuroscience. We love that here in emotional intelligence, and providing therapy and clinical services to kids of all ages. She also wrote a children's book titled What to Do When You Feel Like Hitting. Oh, I love that, which gives evidence-based strategies, not just what we think is good or sounds nice. I love the evidence-based strategies to use when they are in that dysregulated space, when they're going to lash out or hit. So I love that. She translates the recent scientific research into information that is helpful for us. It's relevant, it's accurate for parents and caregivers. And her, like I said, her beautiful Instagram account is at Parenting Translator. Her newsletter is on Substack. I'm going to ask you about that. I just signed up to that just before we were jumping on. And so I'm going to ask you about that later. And your beautiful website, parentingtranslator.com. So where do I start? Like we had called the interview or the discussion, the science of parenting and translating the latest research on for parents. Cara, why do you feel like it's important, because this is a big chunk of what your work's about, getting out to parents what the research says and the science?
Yes. So I was a child psychologist before I became a parent. And then I became a parent and I was talking to, my other mom friends. And I realized, we would be talking about a certain parenting, challenge that we all were dealing with. And I would say, well, like I'd bring up some sort of research I knew on the topic. And I realized that most parents did not know about the research. And I was kind of shocked to realize how few parents knew about the research that was out there, because there's so much, as somebody who's done some of this research, there's so much money and time and effort that goes into this research, and then it doesn't even get into the hands of people who need it. And there are all these barriers to parents getting that information. Like, first of all, we all have such limited time, we don't have time to like pour over all the journal articles. Even if parents did, most parents don't have the training to like break down and really understand and then think, what does that actually mean in my day-to-day life? So I have like a huge passion for the research. I love reading the research. So my idea was just to take the research that's out there, break it down, translate it into information that parents can actually use. So not only summarizing the research, but talking about what does that actually look like in practice? Because as a parent to three young kids myself, I know that in practice, it's not always as perfect as we as psychologists, think it is in theory. In the real life, it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, so many layers of
Yeah.
things going on and all different angles. And, we're mums or parents, but we might also be, employees or housekeepers or running our own business and things like that. So I'm glad you said that, because yeah, sometimes we see what we should be doing and then we think, oh, that's not really working, or that's, how do I do that? So I love that you translate it. I love that word.
Yeah.
You have the skills and the knowledge to understand what the research says and how to apply it to families, and you're translating that for us. Like, I rely on beautiful accounts like yours and what you're sharing to go, oh, this is what that means, and like, we can trust that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I think, there's research coming out every day. So, even as a professional working in the field, you can't keep up with all the research. It's ever evolving. And I think, there's a need for somebody who is on top of it and can help get the information out in the hands of the people who need it. There was a study showing that research can take up to 17 years to get into the hands of people who need it. And this isn't just parenting, this is just in general. And, it's a huge problem, because if we waited 17 years as parents, it's like, oh, our kids' lifetime is, or at least the lifetime that we're raising them, is over. So like we need that information now to make this job, the hardest job in the world, a little bit easier. We don't need it in 17 years. Like, we need it now.
imagine having like a 20-year-old and be like, that would help me when they were 3. But
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
it's so
Too
funny.
late if you wait 17 years.
And also, it would just be so outdated, like it's not recent and relevant. And like you say, stuff is coming out all the time, every day, even month to month or year to year, that there's I want to say, like, advancements or things like that.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to have you on. My brain's going, what are we gonna ask first? So guys, what we are talking about today is really busting some of the common parenting myths and providing evidence-based information for us, so we know what is helpful, what's beneficial. We don't need to say what's right and wrong. Like, we're not here to say stop doing this and you're doing it wrong, or shaming parents or anything like that. But just knowing what the science and the research says, I think this is so important. Like, now that we have access to this, I often say our parents didn't, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we did not have access, and the research wasn't done. A lot of the research wasn't done. Now it is. So it's kind of our responsibility to open our eyes and our ears and our hearts and kind of listen and see what we can take and how we can adjust our parenting to benefit our kids. So one of the big, topics, screen time, is something that is a struggle for all parents. Even me, I need to, I'm conscious of our boundaries and that they're relatively consistent. We're human, but you know what I mean? So that's such a big area. What can you sort of share with us about the recent research and what the science says about screen time for kids and that whole ball of...
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of misconceptions about screen time, and it's a question I get from parents a lot, because I think it's something that we all on some level worry about. And I think the most important thing to know about the research is that, research has yet to find there's something like inherently bad about screen time. You see some of these like scary media articles that say, screen time linked to, issues with brain development and things that are just really scary to you as a parent. And yes, screen time has been linked to ADHD. It has been linked to behavioral problems. It has been linked to, differences in brain development. But what we don't know is, that the families that will put their child in front of the screen for 10 hours a day are very different than the families who don't let their children watch screens at all. And a big part of that is socioeconomic differences. So we really, because we can't randomly assign families to be like, why don't you just try making your child watch 10 hours a day and you don't let your kid watch, you just can't randomly assign that. So the research is all, it was something that we call confounded, which means that the factors like socioeconomic status, it's hard to like really pull that apart. But so we have yet to find that screen time is inherently bad. What we do know is that children learn better from real life interactions than from on screens, particularly young children. So children under 2 in particular have difficulty really learning anything from screens. Preschoolers can learn some limited knowledge from screens. I think a lot of us have seen that, if your child learns like a Spanish word from Dora, or for example, but there's always going to be enhanced learning from real life interactions. So based on that research, what I would advise parents is, if you're in a situation where you think you could have a high quality real life, real-time interaction with your child, then that's always going to be preferable, right? Because your child will learn more from an interaction with you. But as many of us parents know, in the real world, like sometimes I need to cook dinner and I need, my toddler to be safe for 5 minutes while I'm cooking dinner and not be, pulling on my leg as I'm trying to move, the boiling water. And in that situation, it might be safer for him to be in front of a screen. It might be preferable. If I, as a parent, at my wit's end for whatever reason, like I didn't sleep last night and I feel like I'm going to lose it and I might scream at my child, like it might be better to turn on a screen, because we do know that, losing it in your child is harmful. So it's like, you kind of, as a parent, have to balance, like, is this the right time for a screen? If you have the chance to have an interaction with your child and you're in a situation where you can, like, that's always preferable. But, there are some situations as parents where we should put on a screen and not feel guilty about it. And something else we can learn from the research is that the quality of screen time really matters. So there's a study that they had children watch the same amount of screen time, but they changed the content to more shows with more educational messages, or pro-social messages. A good example of that is like Daniel Tiger. That's always like one of my favorite, like pro-social for older kids. Super Y, a lot of the PBS shows are higher quality. If you can think about the content of what your kids are watching, and even if you're not in a position, you've got a lot going on and you need your child to have screen time, at certain times of the week, just think about changing the content to things that are more educational and have these more pro-social messages. There's research showing that, a lot of us will flip on like background television, and that really is not ideal for kids because it takes away from their interactions with the real world, and they're not really going to learn that much, if you're having on the news or a program that's not geared towards children. So really thinking about the content of what you are choosing for your kids' screen interactions.
I love those. That it sounds like there's 2 big messages: not only the content, which is what, the quality of what our kids are watching, but also prioritizing, interactive activities and moments of connection where possible. Yeah. And it's not always possible. I love that you said that too, over screen time, but not that it is like inherently bad. It's not the devil. It's not,
Yes.
there's a place for it. So I really love that.
Yes.
What can you tell us about the gentle parenting movement? We're kind of switching pace. I know that's something I wanted to ask you about in terms of the research and what your understanding of gentle parenting.
So it's really interesting because, being on social media, before I recently got really into social media, I wasn't aware about this. It's a huge movement right now on social media in gentle parenting, but it's really interesting as a psychologist who's been very involved in the research, because gentle parenting, as it's discussed on social media, has not been studied. So I think there are aspects of it that have been studied and there are aspects that have not. And so I think it's kind of drifted away from some of the more evidence-based practices. So what has been studied is authoritative parenting, which is a parenting style that's sometimes equated with gentle parenting, but it's a little bit different than the gentle parenting as presented on social media. Another term that's used in research is positive parenting, which is focusing more on positive reinforcement rather than punishment. So these are all have like are somewhat related to the gentle parenting movement, but I would say that the gentle parenting movement has kind of gotten a little more extreme, to the point that I worry that it in some situations can start to look like permissive parenting, which is a parenting style that research has found to not be as effective. And permissive parenting means like a warm, nurturing relationship without the limit setting and the consistent consequences. So, what research finds is really most effective is combining that warm and nurturing relationship with the consistent consequences and limit setting. Like, you need both pieces. You can't have one without the other. And if you do have one without the other, that's when the parenting style is found to not be as effective. So I think it's very interesting because, there's a lot out there on gentle parenting, for example, that you shouldn't praise your child, when there's actually a lot of research showing that there are a lot of benefits of praise. And, you want to be careful with praise. Something I've talked about on my Instagram account is, being careful not to label your child with praise. For example, research has said if you say, call your child smart, then sometimes that the pressure of that label ends up being a lot. And the research shows that children who are given that label are more likely to give up when they hit challenges. But there's nothing wrong with praise in itself. And I think that's like a common misconception that's out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is so interesting. I also have read bits and pieces, nowhere near as much of the research that you have, I'm sure, but about the differences with the way we praise our kids. And yeah, I have seen some very negative comments on and perspectives on praise, almost like it's the other side of the coin to punishments and things like that, and the bribes and the threats and things. And I think, wow, so I'm glad you've sort of touched on that, because that's a tricky sort of thing to navigate with parents.
Yeah.
I love John Gottman's work around the different parenting styles, and I feel like maybe you can put your perspective on this. He describes 4 different parenting styles: the disapproving and dismissive, and the laissez-faire, which is that permissive style, and then the emotion coach, which allows and accepts emotions from our kids, particularly those unpleasant, really stressful, big emotions, what we call the big emotions, but also that we provide limits and we have boundaries, and we let our kids know when something isn't okay, it's not appropriate, or it's dangerous, or it's harmful, or it's hurtful. So I feel like that's it's a nice mix, a beautiful mix of both. We're accepting and honoring that our child has big emotions, and we're not squashing them down or punishing them or threatening them or go to your room, but we're saying the behavior is not always okay. We have to have limits around that. What do you think?
Yes, and there's a lot of research supporting that emotion coaching style. So, that basically means talking about emotions with your child, your emotions, their emotions, emotions of others, pointing it out in books and movies. So just having like an ongoing conversation about emotions, and also validating their emotions when they're having them, and for younger kids, pointing out what the emotions are and helping them learning, how to cope with those emotions, like learning some coping skills. So that it's really important to have those ongoing conversations with children, because that's how they learn empathy, and that's how they learn emotional regulation skills. So there's a lot of research supporting that approach.
Oh, cool. That's really good to know. I wanted to get your opinion on, you had a post recently about teaching your child not to hit on Instagram. And can you share a little bit? Because I know, it's such a sometimes natural developmental phase when our little ones can't find the right words, or they're too emotionally charged to ask or say that's mine. And so they'll lash out and they'll hit. So what can you kind of share with us, parents, about hitting and teaching your child not to hit?
I think the first point is that hitting is just, and aggression in toddlers in general is a very normal developmental stage. I remember with my first child, when she hit, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done wrong? I'm a child psychologist, and, but it's normal. And I think the sooner, and now that I'm on to my third child and he's hitting, I'm like, this is just what 2-year-olds do, and I think a lot of it is accepting that that behavior is not going to totally go away. At least not anytime soon. But, it's all a lot of the reason that children hit young children is because they don't have the skills to achieve what they want to otherwise. For example, my 2-year-old hits his brother and sister when he wants their attention because he doesn't know how to say, will you play with me? And so it's like helping them to learn the language that they want to use, first trying to figure out, why are they hitting? Is it for attention? Is it because, they're frustrated and they haven't learned how to calm down yet? Is it because they don't know how to say, I need help? What is the reason they're hitting, and to help them gain the skills so that hitting isn't necessary anymore. And honestly, it can take years to kind of work on those skills. There's nothing that's going to be like an overnight fix, but like we've said, talking about emotions, even with a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, it's never too early to start, talking about, that you're frustrated, and what can you do when you're frustrated, and modeling, the deep breathing, and just starting to work with them on gaining those skills, even if it is a slow process.
Yeah. Oh, that is so beautiful. I remember when, I think it was my daughter, my youngest, I think it was her, and we would be talking about, you're frustrated and things like that. And all she could muster was frustrated. I'm frustrated.
Oh,
I was like,
cute. Oh,
great.
favorite emotion word.
Such I think for us, this knowledge, the research, the science behind why our kids behave the way they do, why they have such big emotions, why they can't deal with it in a better way, a more socially appropriate way, that to me makes my triggers go, because I go, of course you did that. No wonder I saw that happening. I'd do that too if I had a 2-year-old brain. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of our frustrations as parents can be helped by just understanding like what's developmentally normal, and that, hitting and being aggressive is very normal for, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and throwing tantrums, having meltdowns is all normal. And like, there's no way to like kind of completely make it go away. There are things we can do to prevent tantrums and manage it in the situation, and prevent aggression and manage it. But, part of it is just normal toddler behavior. And it is kind of frustrating. It is like, it's not, how we would want our days to go, but it is what it is, just accepting that as a parent.
Yeah. I know that you had also done an awesome post. You'd shared a bit of information about picky eaters. And so I kind of wanted to ask a little bit about that for parents before we sort of finish up in a couple of minutes. What can you share about when our kids seemingly are very fussy or picky eaters, and how can we help them?
Yes. So my newsletter going out tomorrow is going to be all about research-backed tips for dealing with picky eaters. And I have picky eaters myself, so I totally get that it's challenging. And the first thing that research says is not to pressure them to eat, not to, push them into eating what we consider to be healthy food or eating more. That pressure usually backfires, and leads to less healthy eating and less eating overall, and also can lead to a pattern of emotional eating, which is not something that we want to put on our young children. The other tips that I think research provides that are very helpful is that repeated exposure is really important. So, I know how frustrating it is to like waste food and keep serving food that they don't eat, but that's really how we get children comfortable with it, because children are so much more comfortable with something that's familiar. So just keep trying with those different kinds of foods that you want your child to try. And the other tip from research that I think is really helpful is pairing foods that your child already likes with new or less liked foods. So, if you have like a dip that they really like a ranch dip, try that with a new vegetable. Or, if you have, if there's a sort of a spice that they like cinnamon, for example, put that on sweet potatoes, or, something that they maybe haven't tried before or aren't that into. So think about the flavors and the foods that they already like, and try to pair them with the foods that you want to try to get them to eat, even if it's, adding a little bit of honey. I serve my kids honey, I call it honey chicken. It's basically just baked chicken with honey, because I mean, what kid doesn't love honey? And it's okay to like sweeten up a new flavor just to get them used to that flavor. Just trying to bring in different sorts of flavors they might already be interested in.
Yeah, there's so many good tips there, really easy, practical things we can do, stopping ourselves from getting frustrated and from forcing our kids, pairing it with something they already like or that's already familiar. And like you said, showing or having that food on the table or on the plate like many times, so that it goes from being like, ooh, what's that? I don't like it, to like, oh yeah, I've seen that before, maybe I'll just try it a bit.
Yeah.
So that's really, really helpful.
And the final tip that I think is backed by research and from my own experience is very helpful is involving them in any sort of meal preparation. It's amazing. Like if my kids, and I realize it's more frustrating to have them help out sometimes, but if they're involved in making the meal, they are so much more likely to eat it. If they feel like, they have control over it, they have, some sort of say in it. I think it really helps them to become more familiar with the food, like I was talking about, and having that sense of choice and control definitely makes them more likely to try it.
Oh, that is cool. Okay, because a few times I have gotten the kids in the kitchen when I've had time and I'm relaxed, and then I'll let them
Yeah, you got to be relaxed. Yeah.
Cucumber or something, and man, it is like wonky as anything, but I'm like, great, put it on the plate.
Yeah, doesn't matter what it looks like.
Oh, that's so good. I'm really glad. Such good information. I love that you translate all this research and what we know is beneficial and what works for kids and us as parents. So I just love your voice, your message, because like we said at the start, we don't have time or the access to sift through what's coming out on the daily. So to have someone like you and to have your newsletter, I want to ask you a little bit about that. I think is so important. So can you tell us about your newsletter on Substack?
Yeah, so I started the newsletter to kind of get into some of these topics in more detail, because with Instagram, I feel like it's a great, medium for getting very quick messages across, but I would love to get like more into detail about some of this research. Like in this week's newsletter, I'm breaking down, all the research on how to encourage picky eaters. And I think I have, 5 main evidence-based tips, and I get into the research behind each one. So if you're interested in more detail and like really understanding a topic, like the newsletter is a great option to do that.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I think the link is parentingtranslator.substack.com. Like I said, I just put it in my browser before, but I'm going to put all the links either like after we hop off the Facebook Live, I'll put them on Facebook. And if you're watching this a little bit later on YouTube, then you guys can look down below, and in the description, there'll be all the links and the information to Cara's Instagram, to her website, to her newsletter on Substack. I highly recommend you guys jump on over, check it out, and really absorb and take in what you can in your parenting journey, because it does not have to be super hard and stressful and difficult and like you don't know what you're doing. I've been there as well, and I just feel the more that like I am learning and the parents around me are learning, things start to make a lot more sense, and things start to, the home comes a little bit more calm and smooth because we know what's happening and why our kids are doing what they're doing and things like that. So is there any last little thing, any last little message or anything you want to share and leave us with before we jump off?
I think the only thing I want to add is that Parenting Translator is a nonprofit organization, so all of these resources are free. And I really believe that all parents deserve access to these resources. My goal is to continue creating these free resources for parents, because I think we all deserve this information that makes, the hardest job in the world, like hopefully like a tiny bit easier.
Yeah, it is. I think it is the hardest job in the world. We don't ever get to clock off, and yeah, lots of challenges. So thank you so much for doing what you're doing, and for your nonprofit organization, and for the amazing stuff that you share with us all on Instagram. And thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was fun. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All right, guys, I will see you all in the next couple of weeks for another interview, another beautiful conversation with someone else in the parenting space and things like that. So please stay tuned. And if you are not already, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not already in the Facebook community, please jump on over to Let's Raise Emotionally Intelligent Kids. I'm always sharing lots of, tips and information and strategies and little like screenshots from Parenting Translator and other accounts. So jump on over there, and we will see you guys very soon. Thank you. See you guys.